Hi, I'm Joe Harroz, President of the University of Oklahoma. I want to welcome you to our Conversations with the President. This platform gives me the chance to talk to some of the great people who make OU so special. Make sure you're subscribed to Conversations with the President, and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. Let's get started. All right, first thing first, I want to thank Dr. Carlos Hill and Marilyn Looper Hildreth for joining us on the last episode. If you haven't watched it yet, please do. They are absolutely stunning. So please listen to that. Welcome back to Conversations with the President. The University of Oklahoma changes lives in so many ways, and we talk a lot about changing the lives of students, and we talk a lot about the impact that they have. One of the things we don't talk nearly enough about is the impact that our faculty and their research has, not just on Oklahoma, but on the entire nation and the world, those that are foremost thought leaders. And that brings us really to our guest today, who is one of those foremost thought leaders, a great intellectual and someone having an impact in the world. Let me go over a couple of the qualifications that you have. We'll talk about these more in depth, but this is a really exciting show. It's Dr. Amy McGovern. Dr. McGovern came here in 2005. I still got you by a few years here at OU, and by the looks of it, about 20 years of age. Your formal positions, the Lloyd G and Joyce Austin Presidential Professor, and you have dual appointments in both the School of Meteorology and the School of Computer Science. You are also the Director of the National Science Foundation AI, Artificial Intelligence Institute for Research and Trustworthiness, and Trustworthy A.I. in Weather, Climate, and Coastal Oceanography. And there's an acronym for that to save us time in the future, which is AI2ES. We're absolutely thrilled that you're here. Your research focuses on developing and applying machine learning and data mining methods for real-world application and with a special interest in high-impact weather. So it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so this is, there is no topic. I guess 2023 hit last year, and all anyone in the popular press was talking about was artificial intelligence. And I'm no Sam Altman, but which will be revealed very clearly in the line of questioning that I have. But it is exciting, and so often when we talk about AI, it seems like we're talking about one of the extremes. Either it's the worst thing that ever happened, right? Generative artificial intelligence, machine learning. Either it's the worst thing in the world and it's going to end humanity, or it's the greatest thing in the world that will change everything. Before we get into the specifics of your area of work, can you sort of give us your background on AI and how you think about it?
Background meaning where I started in AI?
Yeah, where you started in AI, and then in the national and global conversation around artificial, in Davos 2 weeks ago is all they spoke about.
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of give me your thoughts on whether AI is a good thing or a bad thing for humanity.
That's an excellent question. I've been doing AI since before AI was cool. So,
So since before 2023?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. There are people surprised to discover that AI was actually in existence like 50 years ago, and haven't been doing it that long, but I think that it is really, you're right, it's burst into the national conversation entirely in either it's going to save us all, or it is really bad because here's all the bad things that are happening with it. And I don't think that either of those views is the right answer. We need to be really careful about our applications with it, but I think AI really is going to transform our ability to do a lot of things in the world. And we can talk about those specifics about what it's going to do. We'll talk about them for weather. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, are you trying to replace our jobs? And that, I think, is what you're seeing in the news. A lot of people are saying, is AI here to replace our jobs? At least my answer is no. We're trying to help augment what you can do. We're trying to give you new capabilities. We're trying to help focus on the parts, give you pieces that can help you focus on the parts humans are good at. And we're giving you new tools that can help you with the parts that are perhaps mundane or just better forecasts that you can then, put together in new ways.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are hazards that could come with AI, are there not?
There definitely are.
And what are the biggest hazards that you see?
With AI in general, I think those get covered in some of the national conversation. So a lot of the question of letting the AI do your work for you and not necessarily checking, like ChatGPT, it can write for you, and it can write somewhat convincingly, but it hallucinates convincingly. It makes up things. And if you're not understanding that it's making things up, I think the biggest danger is exactly that you're believing things you shouldn't believe. So false pictures, false video, false writing, false news. I mean, all that fake stuff, I think, is really one of the biggest dangers. It could really change the way that we're viewing the world. If our news that's coming at us is full of fake news, and it's also filtered by the lens of what the AI thinks that we want to look at, we're just going to end up in this sort of thinking about one thing without really understanding and looking at the broader context. And that is a fear.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, as with everything, it's neither all good nor is it all bad.
Right.
And so why don't you, since you are a pioneer in AI, and since you've been doing it much longer than many folks had any, certainly at a national level, consciousness about artificial intelligence, except for sci-fi movies, tell us about your area of research and about the Institute.
So I've been working since I got to OU. I've been working on AI for weather, trying to improve our understanding and our prediction of weather events. And I've particularly been looking at severe weather. So because that's what we have in Oklahoma, right? I didn't grow up here. And when I moved here, no one told me that we were going to be on roof number 4 in 19 years.
Right. So you generally have 4.5 years per roof.
Right, exactly.
If the math works out, yeah.
So, we can't stop that severe weather, but if we can improve our predictions of it and our understanding of the foundation of why it's happening, then we could give people more warning, for example, on a lot of these events. And that's something I've been working on since I got here. Our AI Institute is focused particularly on a variety of high-impact weather events. It's not just the severe weather that we get here in Oklahoma, but we're looking at winter weather, icing events, big snowstorms, tropical cyclones, and then also trying to look farther out, so subseasonal. Mm-hmm. And then we also work on coastal oceanography applications, saving the sea turtles, for example. I'd be glad to talk about those too. Yeah. But just looking at a variety of high-impact weather events and with those same goals, can we create AI that is trustworthy, which we want to define what trustworthy means, but can we create AI that is trustworthy that people are going to actually use to help improve their decision-making and actually really impact, save lives, save property?
Yeah. With the number one meteorology school in the country, we have even... those of us that are not expert in this area understand that we have the National Severe Storms Lab, and that we see high impact weather on a regular basis. Certainly in your 19 years here in this position, we've seen the increase in frequency of these events, not just around Oklahoma, but nationally and globally. So the importance of this work seems to be increasing, not decreasing.
I think as the climate is changing, we're getting a shift in those severe weather distributions, but we're also getting more extreme weather that is coming in and definitely causing a greater need for what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And so much economically. I mean, every business has an impact because of the weather. Obviously, human lives are those that are also in the balance. You started off, I assume, with and meteorology has always relied upon computer scientists, and you're at that intersection to bring in large data sets to try and predict the weather. Mm-hmm. And now it's taking this next step, and I take this as the machine learning, the artificial intelligence side, I take it, where you get these large data sets, but then you actually have that AI take it a step further and actually do its own, in quotes, thinking to try and predict with greater accuracy what will come of those out of those data sets. Yes. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement. There's sort of multiple ways that AI is being applied to the meteorology field, and one of the things that's also changed in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a real revolution in that. And so I'll give you both answers so you can see that there's lots of ways that we've been using it. So when I started here, a lot of what we did was take the numerical weather models that are already the models that are based in physics and do a lot of post-processing, try to use AI to try to improve the post-processing because there's always biases in the models, and try to improve our predictions. And that involved taking in a lot of the data you're talking about. Mm-hmm. In the last 12 to 18 months, getting us actually back to ChatGPT, those are foundational models and generative models. Mm-hmm. They've started applying those to weather in general and trying to do global scale weather modeling. And that's something that I think if you'd asked people 5 years ago, they would have said, no, that's still 10, 15 years in the future. And all of a sudden there are companies out there, and it's primarily being done at private industry, that are making global scale weather models straight up from the data. They're skipping the numerical weather and prediction models.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, and what accounted for this huge jump in the development of generative AI for weather modeling?
The availability of the CPU and the data, right? I mean, GPU is really what it is. It's those graphical processing units that you can get them, and you can get so many of them now, and then the data is becoming more available worldwide.
What have the advances been, and at what rate are we what is the rate of acceleration on our modeling for severe weather? I know that for a long time you couldn't make a reliable prediction that was beyond 2 or 3 days. Can you give us an order of magnitude of the impact of the accuracy through these methods?
That's an excellent question. The post-processing and the methods, which I didn't mention in your other question, which are hybrid methods where they take the numerical weather prediction models, but they're taking pieces of them and replacing them with AI because they can make them faster and more accurate. Those are definitely improving the accuracy out much farther. The global scale AI weather models aren't quite ready to probably. It seems like there's a new paper every week, so probably by the time the podcast gets processed and released, I'll feel like I shouldn't have said that. But right now, they're not quite ready to say that they're revolutionizing it, but they're on the cusp of doing that. But I mean, I think it depends on what kind of weather you're really trying to look at, whether or not we can predict it enough days in advance. I think that things like looking at large scale, like we're likely to have tornadoes and hail and big wind events, the kind of thing we can do better with AI now out to about 8 days. Whereas, as you said, a couple of years ago, we couldn't do more than about 2 days out. The precision of like it's going to hit my house in the next hour is still really, really difficult. There's just so much chaos in the system that's actually still really hard. And that's something two students who just graduated last year were working on trying to improve the prediction specifically for hail and then convective initiation, just thunderstorms in general, out to about an hour, right? To be able to do that before they've started, right? To be able to say there's going to be hail at your street in an hour, and that's still a really challenging problem.
Yeah,
but AI is going to help us with it.
But it's stunning, is it not, that the development forever of the ability. You go back to the Farmer's Almanac, right? Trying to predict what the weather might be like. We know the implications, and we were talking. Your son is a senior right now in ours in aviation, and just in the industry of aviation, being able to know where severe weather events are likely to occur can save,
billions of dollars.
Billions
right.
of dollars.
Those hail ones that we were talking about, right? Imagine if you could say very, very accurately, you're likely to have hail in the Oklahoma City airport tomorrow, major 3-inch hail. Move all the planes out of the way.
They're all gone, right?
Yeah.
You move them to where it's going, likely to be safe. And
right. And you can't do that if you only have 15 minutes notice, which is the current average, for a storm that's formed.
And the scheduling of flights, where they go. I mean, the entanglements, we've seen debacles over the last year and a half in the aviation industry where airlines are locked up for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days because they haven't predicted severe weather events. And then once that starts, it triggers all sorts of negative events.
I think some of that is modernization of their system too, but they're working on that, fortunately.
Right.
But I got to ask, I get asked about how some of this stuff is going to affect people in the cockpit too, and I think eventually it will, but right now the cockpits aren't running AI, live to tell you what you're about to see 15 minutes from now. But you can imagine that all of that, I think you're talking, it's a broader scale of what you're talking about. It's definitely going to affect all of the industries. And affect farmers too.
Absolutely.
If I can tell you that we're about to have hail or tornadoes or drought, we could pick a different, a major heat wave, then we can do something to prepare, especially on the drought scale, if we can do something in the subseasonal scale. So you were asking me about days in advance. There's a scale, the weather scale, which you're trying to predict, sort of there's the now scale, like do I care about what's going to happen in the next hour? There's also the next 7 days scale, but then there's looking at 14 days, 21 days. That gets much, much harder. As you get farther and farther out into the future, it gets more towards the climatology, which really gets you to the Farmer's Almanac that you're talking about. Right? It's the averages. That's the long-term averages. And that scale is something that still hasn't really been, we're starting to tackle it, but it's really, really hard. But it's really impactful. If I can tell you about these major cold freezes and these major heat events that are coming through at a scale of about 14 days notice, then governments can take action. Farmers can take action to protect their crops. There's a lot we can do.
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, seasonal prediction is incredibly exciting. I mean, if you knew, you could know what crops to plant or not plant.
Right.
If you could model that out.
Right. Well, and subseasonal is kind of in between the weather and the seasonal prediction scale, and the subseasonal is even harder. It's just, there's so much chaos in there. It's really hard to predict.
Yeah. Do you see this rate of development and change? I mean, you've been surprised over the last 5 to 10 years at the pace of change. As you sit here today, do you think that level of iterative change is likely to continue?
I think we're sitting on the cusp of a huge change. Yeah. And I think it's largely the private industry investment that hopefully is going to keep working with government to do a revolution in our change. I mean, I use that word sometimes when I try to, when you're writing your grant proposals, you're talking about you're trying to revolutionize things, because you really are. But I really think that right now we are sitting on that, because these generative AI models are going to make a tremendous change. It's akin to when they introduced the numerical weather prediction models. And actually, just today, we were reading in my research group a paper that from the 1970s where they were complaining about the introduction of numerical weather prediction models and how it was changing the field of meteorology. And I think we're just sitting, if you replace all of the statements about numerical weather predictions with the words AI in there, it's the same complaints you're hearing now. Well, why do we need to learn the physics when the AI, what are we teaching the fundamentals for if the AI is going to take over? And it's not. But
right. I've had more than a few students ask those sorts of base level questions.
Right.
Right.
If the AI is going to do it for me, why do I need to learn this?
Right. Absolutely. Goes back to the calculator and understanding.
Well, those exact same questions came out with the calculator too. Why do I need to learn the math
Why do
when
I need to learn
calculator is going to be
division when the calculator will do it for me? So when we think about your institute, and the impact that you're having, if you continue on your path of success, and with the development, the acceleration of the application of machine learning, of generative AI, what would success look like for you in terms of the impact of your work on people and property? What would success in your research look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
That is an excellent question. NSF would define it maybe by papers, but I would also add some other definitions which I think NSF would probably agree with, which is that I would like to see us actually having our products in use, in daily use by the forecasters, by the emergency managers, by the general public, so that they're saving lives and saving property. And that gets us back to that trustworthy part. That trustworthy is in our name because it was part of the theme that we applied to, and that our foundational core is that we're understanding what it means to make trustworthy AI for really high impact decisions. Because that matters across a wide variety of, we're talking about weather, but medicine too. You want your AI to be trustworthy for that, right? So success to me is that we've understood what it means to be trustworthy for these high impact decisions, and that we've created something that really is saving lives and property. And it doesn't have to just be weather. It could be that we really fundamentally understand something that works across a variety of high impact decisions. Yeah.
So when we talk about trustworthiness, and earlier you spoke about biases that can be introduced. Can you kind of walk us through that? What kind of biases could be injected into this space that could be deleterious, and how do you ensure they are trustworthy and those biases are removed?
It's an excellent question. So when you hear about the biases in the data in the news, mostly what you're seeing is it's largely racial or gender bias. That's largely what you see, that you train it all on white faces and it doesn't understand black faces, or you train it on Asian faces, it doesn't understand white faces, things like that.
Right.
And people think about that in the beginning. They were looking at the weather and they're saying, oh, no, it doesn't apply. But there are biases in the data. And those biases so we just had a paper that came out last week that talks about categorizing the biases, and we had 4 main categories and a bunch of underlying categories. And the 4 main categories: structural and systemic biases, of which some of that racial data falls into, but doesn't fit for weather necessarily, because we're not looking at faces. But it can affect the data that you record, the data that's available. So for example, there's a lot of data that's only available in the more higher socioeconomic brackets, because that's who's affording the instruments that they're providing crowdsourced data, or that's where they were trying to cover the data. So that can lead to a skew in the data. And then another category that's interesting is just data skews in the data, but something that's very unique to earth science and weather is a skew from the laws of physics. So you can have data that, like, I'll use radar because that's a nice easy example. The radar, the Earth is round and the radar points out in a straight line. And I know that doesn't show up on the podcast audio, but at least it'll show up on the video, right?
Yeah.
So when you're trying to look at the tornadoes, you can't necessarily see the tornadoes if you get too far away from the radar, because physics doesn't work that way, because the Earth is falling away. So that if you were trying to build a model, for example, that was depending on that really low level data, you wouldn't be covering the whole United States. And then if you didn't realize that you didn't have that physics-based bias to your data, you might release a model that you thought worked great that is in fact not covering a bunch of the United States, and that could be a real problem. We actually have a picture in a paper that we wrote a couple of years ago that shows that in the southeast United States, and this is totally not on purpose, I want to emphasize that, but when NOAA was putting their multi-million-dollar radars out, they were covering the bigger cities, but they missed a lot of the rural areas, and the rural areas that they miss are primarily black. And so if you were to put a model out that only used that close coverage, you would miss a lot of the primarily black areas, and that would get you back to that racial bias.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And that ethic, it's really important that you counteract for that bias, that you do the best you can to get all the data you have.
Yeah.
Another example would be like the global south. We just don't have a lot of instruments in the global south. The United States is really, really rich in instruments.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And then, I mean, especially that physics bias that exists.
Yeah.
That, you don't account for the Earth's curvature, and you have linear projection,
Right.
and you just don't pick it up.
Right. Yeah, and I only give you one example of a physics bias, but there's other ones out there. And then there's biases that can happen in the AI models themselves because they don't understand the laws of physics.
Yeah.
So they can learn something that matches the data, but might be a complete violation of the laws of physics.
Okay.
And you got to account for those too.
I just hope all my friends heard me say linear projection and that you agreed with that, because I think I felt a lot smarter then.
Okay, good.
Right. I had 2 classes in physics, and I think that's all I learned. So I appreciate that. Tell me, there was an announcement today that came across my desk that we were able to release.
Yes.
That involves the National Institute for Science and Technology. Is that right, NIST?
Standards.
Standards and Technology. Tell us about this.
So NIST just released a couple months ago. They put out a call for people who are interested in working on something that came from a call from President Biden. He's trying to focus on AI in general and AI safety, and NIST is going to be creating this thing called the AI Safety Institute. AI Safety Consortium. There's another letter in there, but anyway, it's about fundamentally understanding what it means to make trustworthy AI and how we can sort of guarantee that AI is going to be trustworthy. And that's something that we're trying to do inside AI2ES, and something that a wide variety of people, when we talked about the medical applications, we really want to make sure that as AI is really, it is snowballing down the hill, right?
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that what we're doing is trustworthy. And I think the cool thing about NIST getting into this is that NIST is the one who makes the standards for a lot of what we have out there. I think people don't realize that.
Yeah.
But they put the standards out. People have to follow those standards, and then they're safe.
Yeah. So to me, this is really exciting. We just sort of take a step back for the listener if they aren't familiar with NIST. It's I don't know how long it's been around, but their job is to set standards. So if there's one type of plug that you use, I mean, if they're a different private manufacturer of a certain kind of electrical outlet,
Right.
that they can create a standardized set that everyone can conform to, so that you don't have to buy 4 different kinds of plugs to get electricity out of the wall.
But
right?
also there's standards in what they have to be able to handle in the electricity, so none of those plugs are going to catch fire.
That's it. So NIST does this, and it's fascinating because now this National Institute for Standards and Technology is making sure that the artificial intelligence has these standards to ensure trustworthiness.
Yes.
Right, in what they do. So it fits perfectly in your space, and you're a part of this, are you not?
Yes. So there are actually 2 people at OU, 2 groups at OU that have joined in with it, and we're really excited to be part of it. It just, as you said, just kicked off, so I don't have any results to produce yet. The press release just came out.
Yeah,
today.
but it's incredibly exciting that our researchers, you and others, and DISC is a part of this,
Yes,
right?
DISC is the other entity.
And
yes.
what is DISC?
Data Institute for
For
Societal Good.
Yeah. DISC is Data Institute for Societal Change, which is positive, and positive change. And Dr. Ebert.
Dr. Ebert's going to be like, why did you not have your name off the top of your head for me?
No, that wasn't a fair question. I didn't get NIST right, so I think we're even. To me, this is really exciting. I mean, this idea of engaging in standards to ensure that what comes out of it is trustworthy is essential. And to me, it links back to the first question we had together, this question about is AI, right, is generative AI going to end humanity or allow humanity to flourish? And for us to actually be able to answer that in a way that is refined, and to make sure it leans more towards the good than the bad, one of those things is you have to make sure that there are standards and that they are fair and reasonable, right?
Right.
Standards. Yeah.
If we don't have those standards, I do worry about where we're going to go, because I think it's so open that somebody's going to create something that isn't good.
Yeah, and it applies. We've spoken, as you said, we and you brought it back a couple of times. I think it's important for the listeners. We've been talking about it around severe weather events, but this applies to everything from medicine to pick your industry, right, to art.
I don't want my plane to fly itself unless it's meeting certain standards. I don't want my doctor to diagnose things unless it's meeting certain standards. I mean, anything that's high impact, really, you want it to have standards. If it's making a picture of me, I certainly, we can talk about the copyrights of all of that. I agree with the artists need their copyrights, but it's not going to kill me if it makes a bad picture of me.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a robot doing surgery and it does the wrong thing, it could kill me, and I want it to meet a standard.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I could use some image enhancement personally. Like I would want my generative AI to give me a flowing head of hair that is somewhat godlike. That's my goal.
After the show, I can give you a URL that we've been playing with that actually you can put in a picture and you can make whatever you want. And we had some fun with it recently.
Good. We'll do that on the video.
You can give yourself a glowing head of hair.
Right. It'll be sort of Fabio circa 1980. I think is what I'm looking for.
I put myself in an astronaut costume in it, and then I had me skiing down a hill, and it had me with, for some reason, it had me with flowing hair down the hill.
Well, can you give me an example of other industries that have had rapid change on society, like generative AI, where we've had to put in place standards that have helped ensure that it's done ethically and in a way that is under control, in quotes? Are there other examples of that?
That's an excellent question. I would say medicine is probably one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Because there's so much happening in medicine, and
Absolutely.
you don't just want to, I mean... We take our IRB training. I don't know if you have to do that anymore,
absolutely.
but you've done it, I'm sure. And
they
teach you all the bad things that people have done to people, and you learn all of that, and you think, what in the world were they thinking? And now there's ethical rules in place so that we can't just experiment and say, well, we're going to withhold the drug from you.
Yeah, and to me, I look at those other industries, and I think that what will allow us to avoid the panic and to avoid the worst outcomes with this remarkable technology. And we know in the future we're looking at quantum technologies that will present maybe even more dizzying iterative steps, right? Is that we're able to handle it responsibly through a set of standards, and you're doing that. I mean, that's what excites me a lot about the work you're doing, is that you and Dave Ebert, through DISC and through the work that your institute are helping not just our students learn, but helping the nation and the world as we adapt to generative artificial intelligence and machine learning.
I'm actually teaching a class on AI ethics this semester as well. So responsible and ethical use of AI, focused on earth science, but just in general also just responsible and ethical use of AI. And I feel like it should be something we teach in every, the way AI is becoming so common, I think this needs to be something that almost every student needs to understand, right? Because they just need to understand the implications of the AI and what they're doing when they're using it.
Yeah, and I think that our students that have hopped on ChatGPT of late could probably make sure they have a good course in the ethics of of using AI. Dr. McGovern, thank you so much for taking the time. I can see offset they're looking at their watches, which is to say, Joe, you're enjoying yourself, but we're close to the end of 25 minutes. Thank you for what you're doing at the University of Oklahoma. Thanks. You're one of those colleagues we have here that I'm just beyond proud to be associated with. And it's clear, from this podcast, the energy that you bring, and it's clear from all of the national entities that want you to be a part of it, that you're making a massive impact. So we talk about changing lives, and you do it every day. So
thank you.
So thank you so much. And to the listeners, thank you for joining today's show, and make sure you're subscribed to catch all future issues. This is a good example of how exciting they are. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining Conversations with the President.